watch them fall. Standing with love and we'll smoke them all. With an intellect and a savoir-faire. No one in the whole universe will never compare. I am yours now and you are mine, and together we'll love through all space and time, so don't cry. One day all seven will die. House lights, come on y'all. Clap your hands. I saw an angel come down at me. In her hand she holds the very key. Words of compassion, words of peace. In the distance, numbers marching feet. But behold, we will watch them fall. Oh yes we will. Lay down in the sand of the sea. Force and animosity stand and decree. We speak not of love, only blasphemy. In the distance, I hear somebody trying to curse me, but that's alright. You know what? We will watch them fall. Yeah. Everybody sing, come on. Oh, seven. Watch them fall. Standing with love and we will smoke them all. With an intellect and a savoir-faire. No one in the whole universe will ever compare. I am yours now and you are mine, and together we love through all space and time, so don't cry. Break it down, let me hear you sing the chorus. Oh, seven. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. This is David Penn. It's this episode number 139, Understanding. Here we are. It's the 29th of August, Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Good morning and good evening at the same time, Tanner. Good to see you.
Good morning, good evening, everyone.
We're working so hard here. Things are a blur right now. And one of the moments where I get to be more myself is doing this with you. I want to start out with just some housekeeping. Tucker came up with a great idea. Thank you, Tucker. He put in the live chat this past episode that he's been reposting the podcast on his Facebook page. And that is what I'm going to ask everybody to do because, it's so hard, when you're not trying to monetize really directly with YouTube and, they don't, we're not an entertainment center here. We're a political podcast. So we have to grow this audience organically. And we think it's so important. I think it's so important because we're really trying to deliver information that's valuable politically. And we're asking for help. I'm asking you to please, if you like the content, I think Tucker had a great idea. Repost the links in your social channels. I always say bring people to the podcast. Hey, that's how we're going to do it. I was, missing something here. So Tucker, one of our loyal viewers, came up with a great idea. I don't know how did I miss that one? Tucker got you got the drop on me, young man. But that's a great idea. So I'm going to ask everybody, please repost the links, and particularly if you're in the state of Minnesota and you're a member of the party, use the link and let's get everybody coming here so that we can have a political media place to gather because we're all interacting and talking to each other. I mean, I'm talking to people throughout the state. One of the great benefits of the campaign, Royce White for Senate, here in Minnesota, is that I'm meeting so many people around the state. And I have to tell you, just this is a criticism, but it's a criticism because I'm critical about it. Having been involved in party politics for several years and recognizing that the party intentionally kept people separated. And it really goes down even to levels that are profoundly deep. Like we have these Senate districts. And of course, we have to have districts, neighborhoods, but each district is its own little canton, for lack of a better metaphor. And people don't mix outside of their own district. So, how do you ever organize anything, or how do you ever build any kind of momentum to change the status quo when nobody communicates with each other? The party doesn't share information. I was actually told by as senior as it gets in the party, stay in your lane. In fact, they shut down something that the proto Professor Penn podcast was something I did here many years ago. It's probably 2021, maybe, called the Master Class. Somebody said, is that kind of a Masonic thing? No, I was thinking musically because we have these musical master classes. But anyhow, um, I started this kind of proto Professor Penn podcast, but I was doing it live. And I was attracting Republicans from throughout the state, and we'd gather at a local high school. And I even had a band. I met a really cool guy. His name's LaSalle Gabriel. He's been interviewed on Please Call Me Crazy by Royce. And LaSalle is a Grammy-winning musical artist. And I even had his band come in and play. I'll tell you what happened. Some of the, I say this all the time. The average age of the Republican Party in Minnesota is 462 years old. So people actually come up. This guy's like a monster, right? And people come up to me and say, it's too loud.
Can you turn on the music? It hurts
Can you
my
please
ears.
turn that volume down? I'm thinking to myself, wow. Anyhow, we had this thing going and going and going. It was cool. And the party saw it growing and they just came in there, intervened, and shut it down. And but that was the start of a movement here in Minnesota. I'm not saying it was just me, of course, because there's many other Minnesotans that are lovers of country that have been trying to bring about change. But that was a big push here that started to get people coming together. And that's what this podcast is. It's an opportunity for people to gather. And, those of you who leave comments, I try to get back to you. You can always go to support@target.com and send me an email, and I'll try to respond to it. Somebody wants a hat. I've been waiting for that call, for that email. I'll get that hat for you. Anyhow, my point is this. This is a gathering place. I try to be entertaining. Occasionally I am. Occasionally. Occasionally I'm funny. Uh, Occasionally I'm tragic. But I try to deliver a lot of information that people can use in their daily life, because what are we trying to do here? We're trying to enhance human well-being. And we started out with Prince. Boy, I have a lot of connectivity with Prince. First of all, my son was best friends with the son of Prince's drummer. Uh, Prince and we're not the same age, but we're close. And I had opened in 1981 the first fully digital recording studio in Minnesota. You didn't know that, did you?
You.
Yeah, me. It was called Energy Audio Recording.
No way. So
Yeah,
this
no,
is
seriously. Because when I tell people I'm a musician and they just think, ha ha ha. Well, I'm an ex-musician because I'm a big believer in don't take props for what you can't do anymore. I'm
Yeah.
I'm in politics now. There's no time. But at that time, I was really trying to build a musical career, and I had a fantastic studio. And then Prince came on the scene, and I have to be frank, I didn't get Prince because of my orientation, cultural background. And I looked at him and go, "Well, that's out there." The way he dressed and the whole presentation was not. And boy, down the road, I discovered his music, and he's a genius. I mean, just a genius. Just that song 7, which is about the 7 deadly sins, which we'll talk about tonight. Uh, if you go listen to the official version, what he recorded that was put out on an album, it's a completely different kind of a musical presentation. That's almost a country sounding uh, version of it. And his guitar playing is so eloquent and so musical and so crisp and clear. The man is a genius. And his guitar player was a dude named Des Dickerson. He used to record at my studio all the time, which was cool. And what happened was Prince opened up this place called Paisley Park. Have you heard of Paisley Park?
The name rings a bell, but I don't.
He built. I had my badass studio, and then he built. I had a battleship, and he built an aircraft carrier, and that was the end of Energy Audio Recording because everybody wanted to hang out with Prince, and I get that, and that's just the Darwinist. We have a love your neighbor as you wish to be loved. And then there's the yang side of that is Darwinism, which is there is a competition of the fittest. And he's just a genius. And he's a Minnesotan. And I was tangentially involved with him his entire life, even up to the time of his death. Uh, I had some awareness of what was going on in his life. And people that I knew very well were trying to intervene just as he was dying. And I look at all that energy and that grace and creativity, and it's just a tragedy that he died, and he died young, and we don't pick the time of our death, but we can certainly, hurry it along by our free will, which is part of what, tonight's podcast is about, and those of you who have been, watching me, I get a kick out of it. Every once in a while, somebody says, "I've watched every podcast." It happened several times. I think, "Wow. That's cool, because I put a lot of time into thinking about this, and I have to be frank, not as much now because 'cause I'm running around on this campaign, and woe is that an experience, being on a political campaign? Wow! That's a 24-hour-a-day deal. And the phone rings 2:30 in the morning, there's something to do. So, you know, the theme of my politics, and I've been very direct about this, is it's the politics of human well-being, and I've said this for a long time, and now it's coming to the forefront. I've said for a long time, we've lost the focus of what America was all about, what republicanism was all about. We've turned into something that's the natural way. They say in the, Asian culture, it's rupa, water flows downhill. It just flows. I mean, things just evolve. But boy, have we evolved in a strange direction based on the founding documents of the country. And what the founders believed, the whole point of the thing was human well being. That was the whole point of why there's America. They fled monarchical dictatorships that were in collusion with the Catholic Church or a church like the Anglican Church to set up a autocracy, and then everybody else was, a serf. The king had divine authority, and, hey, it's good to be king. Whatever you want, you know, you get it. You're the king. And of course, we know these people, they're people. I mean, takes a long time. We're still trying to wake up. We're still slumbering here. Let's put it this way. We woke up, took a look around, and went back to sleep. And when did we wake up? We woke up right after the Enlightenment, which is branding, because that was the end of faith. So it really what they were saying was faith was darkness and enlightenment was science. Okay. Mm, we'll leave that for another time. We've talked about that a lot. We won't delve into it too far tonight. But what they call the Enlightenment and the growth of new philosophies that uh, commented on church doctrine, on religious doctrine, started to study the natural world. Science grew out of that. Science became technical. Techniques started to develop, techniques that could be monetized, and a whole new thing started to come about, which was people had resources. Regular people had resources. And with resources come different expectations. And this challenged the monarchies. It didn't matter where, Japan, China, but mostly Europe, because that's where the Industrial Revolution took off. And just pre the Industrial Revolution, when we started to have sailing ships and colonization, a lot of Europeans, particularly Christian Europeans, wanted to leave Europe because they wanted to practice Christianity in their own essential way. They didn't want to be ruled by a king because they believed in a heavenly king. And they came here to the New World to establish a different kind of governance, which was republicanism. Republicanism as opposed to monarchy. That was the deal. And it's been rebranded today, but the same issue goes on today. Am I the sovereign or am I ruled? So they came over here and they formed this new kind of governance, which, it culminated in our founding documents, which enshrined the ideas of republicanism, which is the individual citizen is the sovereign. The people are sovereigns, and we elect representatives to kind of do the work, but we're sovereign. We the people, you, we are the sovereigns. And critical, why did they do this? Why did it matter? Why did it matter that the individual was the sovereign? And it's just very simple. Uh, Human well being is enhanced when people have the exercise of their own free will. Now, there's 7 deadly sins, and you can use your free will to veer off in a very unfortunate direction. And we're going to talk about that tonight. But and Prince sang about it so beautifully. You know, oh 07, we're going to watch them fall. He's talking about the 7 deadly sins. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Isn't that interesting? Do you know that song?
I don't.
Wow. You can go listen to it again when you're cutting this up in the studio.
Here, I'll download one of his albums right now.
Well, there you go. 7. It's fantastic.
7.
But he's talking about the 7 deadly sins. And what the founding fathers and that whole philosophical movement that led up to the formation of America, what they understood was freedom enhances human well-being. That when I'm told what to do, when I can't exercise my own free will, I'm compressed. I don't feel good. And it's just that simple. Now, people are going to say, well, I'm as free as I want to be in America. Well, go back and look at that Herman Kahn piece that we played a couple of podcasts back and look what they have in mind for us. And we're seeing this, the walls are closing in. It's like the old story with the frog in the pot. You know, if you boil it up slowly, you're going to have frog for dinner. If it's too hot at the start, he'll jump out. Uh, we don't recognize yet as the American people that we're being boiled in the pot very systematically, very effectively. And when we're boiled, it's over. And I think Dan Schultz said something there was 2 things Dan said in the last podcast that I thought were fantastic. One, you can vote your way into socialism, but you can't vote your way out. Brilliant analysis. Maybe he picked it up from somebody else. I'd never heard that before. And another thing is, there's a difference between socialism and Marxism and it's all the same, okay? That's just branding and scamming. There's just two states here. It's we're ruled or we're sovereign. I would like to be a sovereign. I like to make my own mistakes, and I've made a lot of them. A lot of them. But I prefer making my own mistakes than being told what to do. I don't like that. And I hope you don't like that. And if we're going to maintain our freedom, we got to get out the vote. We got to do the door knocking. We got to repost the links. We got to get activated. But it doesn't ever stop. This is a theater that keeps on going as long as they don't push that red button. So the whole issue tonight is that there's a break in the wall, which was brought to us by Robert Kennedy Jr. when he suspended his campaign. We're going to talk about that tonight because the suspension of his campaign included a long dissertation on human well-being and human unhealth. And what's so cool about this is it's not a wedge issue. Like if I'm going to knock on your door and your girlfriend answers the door, knock, knock, knock. Hi, I'm David Penn. I'm with the Republican Party. I'd like to talk to you about the upcoming election. She might say to me, you want to take my reproductive rights away. Get out of here, right? Possibly.
We've had conversations. I don't think she's that strong opinion about it, but
it's possible in your generation. It could happen.
100% in my generation. Yeah.
I'm just using her as an example, right? So, what are you going to say? You got a wedge issue. Or the war in the Ukraine, wedge issue. Or this whole litany of wedge issues that have divided the people. And why are the people divided? Because the people that can't unify can't change this status quo, this business model of slavery, debt slavery, cracking over $35 trillion. Got to understand what that means. The bank always gets paid. Got to pay that back. $35 trillion. Drugs, which Robert Kennedy took down to the granularity of food. Because food's a drug. It alters our system. Wow. Drugs, debt, slavery, drugs, piracy, war. How are we going to alter this if they got us all fighting in these little cantons over these little side deals? Side deals. The whole deal is about the health and well-being of your family and my family and Tanner's family and his daughter. That's what this is all about. The rest of it is a distraction. A distraction. So we're going to get into this tonight and try to delve through what RFK Jr. opened in the force. He opened up a hole in the force. Man, you're not going to get this, and a lot of people aren't going to get it. But this hole is so big, the refrigerator Perry could run through it and score a touchdown. It's that big. I think it's that big of a deal. We'll probably play the refrigerator Perry next time. Just for those.
Refrigerator Perry?
We'll do that next time.
Okay.
It's hilarious. Don't let me forget. Anyhow, Robert Kennedy Jr. Suspended his campaign, and he actually endorsed Donald Trump, as has Tulsi Gabbard. And these are, key people in the Democratic establishment. And what they're saying is the Democrat Party's corrupt. And, I said this, I'll say it again. We're not voting for a Valentine. We're picking the best of the options. You're only good or bad by comparison. It doesn't matter if you like these people. You're making a chessboard move. Where are we headed here? More repression, more control, more socialism? Or are we going to open up an avenue to reclaim and restore maximal human freedom for maximum human well-being? They go together. And boy, I wish I could gather up the thousands of people that watch this in a field someplace and just spend 3 hours outside working on human well-being, because it really is critical that we have the freedom to do these things. He suspended his campaign. Later in the day, he went on a stage with Trump, and people were screaming wildly for him. He is kind of a rock star. But when he gave this speech, which I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a long podcast. If you hang out at the end, I'm going to tag that speech at the end today just because some people haven't seen it. Did you see the speech?
I've seen bits and pieces. I haven't watched the whole thing.
Well, if you watch the whole podcast tonight, you're going to see the whole thing. And it's worth watching. It's a gripping speech. He's a charismatic man, and he's brought forth an idea that's critical. And that idea that's critical is we're not well. And this is a tradition in his family to look at human well-being, which I'm going to play a historical piece from his uncle. So that was a big deal. And, right away, right after this came out, because you can't argue with facts that come right off government websites. I mean, if you're a big government supporter and, somebody like Bobby Kennedy is using CDC data to advance a narrative about increasing unhealth amongst our children, amongst our population, what are you going to say? You can't impugn the data. It's the government's data, unless you want to say the government's lying, which the Democrats don't want to say because they're the government. He trapped them, right? They're trapped like rats. So what do? They impugn his character. Right away, I'm on X. If you're on X, you saw it. This avalanche of anti-Bobby Kennedy attacks, attacking his character. People in his family came out against him. Man, unbelievable. In other words, the facts, we had this with Royce White here in Minnesota. The policies don't matter. The ideas don't matter. It's just some beef that maybe isn't even true, that somebody ginned up in a basement to make them look bad. Why do we pay attention to that? This is the thing really got me. I'm pissed off about this now. I've been watching this a long time. We got a Congress full of people. They wear suits and ties. I used to wear a suit. I don't do it anymore on purpose. Just not doing it. Maybe one day I'll crack my suits out again. But they all dress up nice, starched white shirts. They got their American flag lapel pins. They got pretty wives at home, kids. They probably were in the military. They're probably lawyers. They might have gone to Harvard. These people are right out of central casting to be politicians, as if they've been working on it their whole lives. And then what do they give me? War and disease and debt and drugs and problems, like they can't solve anything. Am I supposed to be stupid? Yes, I am. They're depending on you and me to be dumb, that we take this as the way it's supposed to be. This is not the way it's supposed to be. They have reduced the sovereign citizen, whose health and well-being is the only reason we have a government. They've reduced us to units of inventory that are monetized from birth till death. And when I say monetized, I think Bobby Kennedy says in his speech, the most profitable business in America is a chronically ill child.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, 100%. I would, because as a father, I would do anything to make her feel better. So if, you make a sick child, the parents are going to bring them to the hospital unless they're crazy parents. Am I you're going to protect your kid.
You're going to do everything you can. But if what you are facing is a society of disease, a society that's divided, a society that's at war, and then we're going to put 535 people up on the screen and say, oh, you people are great. They're not great. It's theater. We're being monetized. It's just that simple. So Bobby Kennedy blew a hole in that. And out comes all these scurrilous attacks on him. Scurrilous. And now when you go on X, it's like he disappeared. Because here's what happened. Because this stuff doesn't happen by accident. They said, oh, wow, what are we going to do? The truth is slipping out here. Let's make him into a terrible person. It didn't work. So their next move is disappear him.
Well, something else I was seeing, and I don't know if this is necessarily true, but apparently in some of the swing states now, the Democratic Party is trying to make sure that he's still on that ballot, even though he suspended his. I don't know what the legality
When at the
of that.
same time, they're blocking the leftist progressive Cornel West from getting on the same ballot. This is politics. Let us not cry. I like Steve Bannon says there's no tears in the war room. What are we crying for? You know why they get away with this? Is you're still at home on the couch instead of going to precinctstrategy.com and figuring out how to get in the game of politics or calling your local political unit. When Dan Schultz says all hands on deck, hey, you think it's pretty good now, right? Pretty good. It's pretty good. Still pretty good. Drove to work today. Got gas.
Had a cup of coffee with me.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, when the iron fist comes out, when they take the velvet glove off the iron fist, things are going to change very quickly. And this is, we're right on the verge of it, and I think we have a sense for it. But we need to get everybody, repost the links. TrumpForce47.com. Join your local political unit because now we got a new bag. Papa's got a brand new bag. Oh, I got the music for the next episode. Papa's got a brand new bag. We got a new unifying political ideology to work on, which is human well-being. It's not new to me. I've been talking about it for 139 episodes. But now somebody that's got real star power has come out and said, wow, listen to this, kids. It's great. And then, of course, we've got this AI now crawling around the world, artificial intelligence. And people are so daft as to say you can recognize it. I think AI learns. Yes, you can recognize AI today, but tomorrow you will not. So what is truthful and what is false? How to get to the truth? Because I've said this, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Man, we'll talk about that just upstream here a little bit. It's going to be very difficult for citizens to know what the truth is. Very difficult. You'd actually have to have a kind of MK Ultra-like ability to discern, or a Christian ability to discern. If you want to know what the truth is, you're going to have to study, and you're going to have to think, and you're going to have to build an information system in yourself, and information becomes knowledge, and knowledge can become wisdom. Facts don't mean anything. That they just manipulate you. You aggregate facts into knowledge, well, now you got something. But unless you're wise about it, it doesn't mean anything. And we're going to have to all do this. Say, oh, well, that's a lot of work. Well, freedom takes a lot of work. That's why we're giving up our freedom. Why? Well, guess what? When people aren't well, and this was Dan Schultz's other great contribution to my life on the last podcast. So, Dan, if you're listening, thank you very much. Dan made and this is marketing. It's, it's a tagline, but it's really insightful. The politicians in our politics is a symptom of the disease we have as American citizens. The citizens are diseased, which fits right into this well-being theme. I mean, we're getting some here. We're going someplace quick with this. If everybody picks this up. So I want to talk about, and I only want to talk about one thing. The health of my children. Oh, who's going to get on the other side of that?
Yeah.
Right? Who's getting on the other side of that? And if you look at some of the things that children are going through, not to get specific because we are, an underground broadcast and I want to stay up here on YouTube with you. If you look at some of the things that children are going through, a guy my age goes, what? How do you get people to do that? It's like, I can say this, like suicide bombers. Do you know why the incidence of suicide bombing is declining? And it is, it's going down. Less suicide bombers. It's very simple. Even in the most traditional cultures where people want to go meet God, you got a small subset of people that want to strap bombs on their back and blow themselves up. And once those people are gone, hey, you got to restock. It takes time. That's not a mass market audience. I got a smile at Tanner. Good morning, Tanner. Anyhow, since I saw you last, we haven't had a chance to talk because we've been doing all this stuff. I just want to point out that at the DNC convention, the new Democratic Party platform was rolled out, and it pledged ironclad commitment to Israel. They got a problem over on that side of the football because not all their constituents believe this. The ironclad support for Israel amid its U.S.-backed war in Gaza. Quote, President Biden and Vice President Harris believe a strong, secure, and democratic Israel is vital to the interests of the United States. I'm not commenting on that right or wrong. I'm saying that within the Democrat Party, there's a growing cohort of people that generally vote for Democrats that don't believe that. That is a wedge issue in the Democrat Party, big time. That's an opportunity for the American nationalist movement. And in Israel, there's all this warp and woof about negotiating a peace settlement with Hamas in the Gaza. Well, some people are saying in the government that Benjamin Netanyahu, their top guy there, is blocking a peace settlement. Generals are coming out and saying, that's not true, it's Hamas. I'm not there. I don't know. You know what I look at? The war continues. So block it or not, a lot of people are getting killed every day in a war that has no end. Because if you're a Palestinian and you're looking at what's happening to your people, do you really have any incentive not to fight? You're in a corner. I mean, hey, die on your knees or die on your feet. And those people are tough. They'd rather stand up. So they've been backed into a corner. I think there's, what did I read? I can't remember. I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm going to just say it this way and I'll look it up. There's an enormous number of people in a 15 square mile area. That's crazy. The number that sticks in my head is 2 million, but I think it could be 200,000. But they've got everybody in one area. It's extremely unwell. Think about, this is the suspension of freedom. Those people are not free. They're surrounded. They're being killed. They're not making any decisions for well-being. They're just trying to survive. There's optimization, well-being, and then there's just getting to tomorrow. It can happen to anybody at any time. Like for me, I got, 2 days ago, I was, I don't know how this happened, but a spider. I'm in Minnesota. My house is the backyard of my house is a natural area. So we got all kinds of critters back there and snakes and bugs. And I haven't been keeping up with the backyard because I've been on the campaign. I went out there and looked and I went, whoa, this is a jungle. What am I going to do? And while I was out there, a spider bit me many times. And for the last couple of days, I haven't been thinking about well-being. I've been thinking about how far is this going to go? So, this can happen on the individual level. You can be challenged, in an instant, which I am right now. I haven't slept for 2 days because it hurts so bad I can't sleep. And these people are challenged at the level of survival. So this well-being theme is so critical. Like now I have to recover my well-being. I've got a challenge. I'm cool with that. But nobody's shooting at me. That's taking it to a whole other level, right? And speaking of shooting, President Biden, still our president, but not good enough to run again. Contradiction. President Biden has approved a new nuclear strategy to prepare for nuclear war with Russia, China, and North Korea. Hey, there's some news for you. There's the news that matters. President Biden approved a new nuclear strategic plan that includes preparations for a simultaneous nuclear war with Russia, China, and North Korea, the New York Times reported. The New York Times, they're kind of on the payroll, right? Sometimes when you want to threaten people, you let top secret information out into the public square. It's a threat, right? Hey, we're ready to bomb your ass with nuclear weapons. Maybe you want to settle down. The U.S. nuclear strategy is updated about every 4 years. If our country was so great and our people were so great and our philosophy of republicanism was so great, because republicanism is great. So that's the argument right there. We are living in the Democrat liberal order. Republicanism is replaced. What we're trying to do here in this citizens movement is restore republicanism, not the Republican Party. Let's get that right, because they're Democrats too, many of them. But the party is changing. If you're watching me and your Minnesota officer, let's knock on doors. Let's get it together, because we can have republicanism right here in Minnesota. And Tanner, can I tell you what republicanism is? You're free and well.
Yeah.
Doesn't that
I've
sound
been
great?
following it and I've been loving it. The way that I think about it is we need to return to Abraham Lincoln's party.
That's
That's
pretty
how I
cool.
think of it.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Without the Civil War.
Without the Civil War, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll leave
Love
that on
Abraham
the
Lincoln.
we'll leave
but
that on the
yeah.
sidebar. Could you please keep us up on air? Stop now. Anyhow, they have rolled this thing out, this new nuclear strategy, and they're threatening people. And if we were so great, why do we have to threaten our neighbors? You know, if you're living next door to somebody and your relationship is with them, every time you see them, you pull a handgun out. That's not a great relationship. Meanwhile, the Ukraine, the Democratic Republic of the Ukraine that we're supporting because they're democratic. We have to support the democratic Ukraine against the autocrat Putin and the Russians, right? Since I saw you last, they've now banned the Orthodox Church in the Ukraine. The bill is called Bill 8371, and it bans the country's largest Orthodox church. It's called the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the UOC, merely because it maintains a communion with the church in Russia. Like, hey, okay, we're not going to have that relationship there. Now we're not giving it up. Can't have that. Now we're not giving up. Okay, we're banning you. So that's not freedom of religion. So when everybody's thinking about, of course, I'm looking at X and people are saying that, the Russians have to be denazified. You see, this is all a battle of ideology. Battle of ideology. But freedom includes my freedom to worship as I choose. That's my freedom. There's a lot of risk in that. A lot of risk. Because I could be a Christian and the guy next to me could be a Satanist. But that's free will. Republicanism is about the maintenance of free will, about protecting free will. That's what it's all about. It's not about anything else. It's not about, $2 trillion on medical every year and $2 trillion on military every year. That's not republicanism. That's the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. Republicans are about free will. Something to contemplate. What else we got here on the news that matters? Oh, here's a great one. A cyber attack hits U.S. defense supplier of critical chips. U.S. chip maker Microchip Technology disclosed that an unauthorized party, I wonder who that could be, had compromised certain servers and some business operations. Shut them down. Microchips. Unbelievable. I remember Hillary Clinton saying that cyber attacks were an act of war and she would respond with nuclear weapons. Oh, that's great. In Europe, they have confiscated $282 billion worth of Russian assets. Well, they didn't confiscate them. They froze them. What's the difference? Well, the difference is there's a hope someday that the Russians are going to get their money back. That's not going to happen. The Europeans have taken this money. What does that mean? It means the monetary system, such as it is, okay? So we don't have time to go into the whole Jekyll Island thing tonight. But the monetary system, one of its fundamental attributes was it's just about the money. We're going to keep the politics out of it because if I give you money, I don't want you to look at me and say, hey, Professor Penn, I'm not giving it back to you because of the podcast. Whoa, that means we can't do business. And what's happening is business is breaking down. Business is breaking down. When you start stealing people's stuff, business breaks down. When business breaks down, guess what? There's less money. And when there's less money, guess what? I'm poor. Something to think about. And just to end this for the people that are like in your age group, people are saying, "Oh, life's pretty good." Some of them are saying that, right?
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think any of my friends are saying that.
Really?
Yeah, my generation feels it probably the hardest.
Great. My generation thinks things are still pretty good. They read, statistics. Like lies, and then there's damn lies, and there's statistics. Don't miss this one. This is a classic. The Biden administration just revised the jobs numbers they revised them down by almost 1 million jobs. I said, our numbers were poor. We have to restate. So all the stock market, all the optimism, all the Bidenomics is doing great. They overstated how many jobs there were by 800,000 jobs.
So like at what point was it revised? Like what was the date that
it was
those
revised
numbers...
just a couple weeks ago? And what they did was that they looked back at their previous statistics and they said, oops, we made a mistake. So we're in an election year, and the stock market rides up and down on jobs numbers, and the Fed makes decisions about interest rates on job numbers. And they said, sorry, we're off by 1 million. Hey, no big deal. It's only
1 million.
It's only 1 million jobs. Hey, who's counting? That's the point. We're not supposed to pay attention. But this is really quite Soviet. The Soviets, back because I was there, I remember they used to give output numbers, and we did this and we did that, and people were starving. We got this, it's all good. But the people knew. But we haven't reached that point yet. And why we haven't reached that point yet is the Fed is still flooding the zone with money. There'll come a day when the liquidity is going to dry up. I don't know what the day is. Can't predict it. But when that day comes, all these lies that we've been living by are going to be revealed. But of course, it'll be too late then to do anything about it. That's why we got to get to the polls immediately. Immediately. Got to go. Election day, everybody. Got to go. I have so much stuff to talk about in the news, I can't even get through it. We'll come back to it next week. I didn't realize I had that much news. Now, we're going to get into the pith of tonight's podcast. We're going to play something called The Liberators, and I'm going to be setting up something that I kind of had a revelation. I'm looking forward to this podcast. I realize I'm not real linear tonight because I haven't slept for 2 days because of this spider. But the next part of it, I'm going to dial in and drill in, and let's take a trip together about what really is the heart of the matter here. Tanner, can you play number 2, please?
The man came up to us and said, there's a factory about a mile down the road, and you will find a lot of Jewish women in there that were trapped there, and the SS is guarding them. We opened this shed, we went in there.
Though fighting still raged in the Pacific Theater, World War II in Europe officially ended with Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945. Allied armed forces advanced across Europe in the war's final stages, relentlessly pursuing the retreating German army. As they did, they stumbled onto camps, often accidentally, that had been established and run by the Nazis and their local collaborators. The Soviet army, advancing from the east, liberated Nazi camps in Poland, including Majdanek and Auschwitz. The British and Canadians, advancing from the west, liberated Bergen-Belsen and camps in northern Germany. The Americans, our focus here, liberated Dachau, Buchenwald, and other camps.
As their armies advanced across Europe, the Allies found thousands of people imprisoned in camps. They encountered piles of corpses and thousands of skeletal prisoners on the verge of death from malnutrition and disease. This was their first encounter with the horror of what would come to be known as the Holocaust. They began to understand that the Nazis had committed atrocities against civilians, the vast majority of them Jews, on an unimaginable scale, and that these atrocities were very different from the deaths caused by conventional warfare. A new category of crime had to be recognized to describe the intentional attempt to destroy a people. This crime came to be known as genocide. The soldiers were the very first outside witnesses of the Holocaust, an unprecedented case of genocide.
The testimonies of the first soldiers who entered the camps, known as the liberators, are important eyewitness accounts of the mass atrocities committed against the Jews of Europe by the Nazis and their collaborators. Hardened combat veterans, the American GIs were used to death. Many had been fighting for years, but they had never seen killings of civilians on the massive scale they discovered. Their first encounters with Holocaust survivors at this unique moment in time give us an essential and intensely human perspective on the difference between military war and genocide.
Leon Bass was 20 years old and was among the first U.S. soldiers to arrive at Buchenwald.
I can never forget that day, because when I walked through that gate, I saw in front of me what I call the walking dead. I saw human beings that had been beaten, had been starved, had been tortured. They'd been denied everything. They had skeletal faces with deep-set eyes. Their heads had been clean-shaved, and they were standing there, and they were holding on to one another just to keep from falling. I saw the clothing of little children, the little children that didn't survive. Up against the wall, there were mounds of clothing. I saw the caps, sweaters, the stockings, the shoes, but I never saw a child.
Harry Mogen was a Jewish refugee from Nazi persecution. He reached the United States and became a soldier and a liberator.
And you saw women on the floor, on wooden pallets. When I say women, you saw skeletons. Rags hanging on them, no shoes. Bones instead of faces, and the stench was so horrible. It's hard to describe.
What the American soldiers found at Ohrdruf, a subcamp of Buchenwald, was so grisly that General Dwight D. Eisenhower, then the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in Europe, together with Generals Patton and Bradley, arrived to inspect the camp for themselves. After his visit, Eisenhower cabled,
"The things I saw beggared description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were so overpowering as to leave me a bit sick. I made the visit deliberately in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things if ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to propaganda."
These words are now engraved on the wall of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.
Eisenhower's eyewitness testimony reveals that what he saw at Ohrdruf left a powerful impression. Eisenhower foresaw the problem of disbelief that could fuel the denial of atrocities committed by the Nazis and their collaborators. He emphasized that he purposely witnessed these horrors so that no one would later be able to deny what he saw with his own eyes. Eisenhower was convinced that the world needed to know. He made sure that members of Congress and journalists were brought to see the camp. He had all nearby soldiers whose units were not on the front lines visit as well, writing, "We are told the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for. Now, at least, he will know what he is fighting against."
U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Horace Evers was among the first Allied soldiers to enter Adolf Hitler's abandoned Munich quarters. He discovered Hitler's personal stationery. He crossed out Adolf Hitler, inserted his own name, and wrote a letter home about the camp he had seen just outside of Munich.
Dearest Mom and Lou, a railroad runs alongside the camp, and as we walked toward the boxcars on the track, I thought of some of the stories I previously had read about Dachau, and was glad of the chance to see for myself, just to prove once and for all that what I had heard was propaganda. But no, it wasn't propaganda at all. If anything, some of the truth had been held back. In 2 years of combat, you can imagine I have seen a lot of death. Furious deaths, mostly. But nothing has ever stirred me as much as this. The first boxcar I came to had about 30 what were once humans in it. Bodies on top of each other. No telling how many. And then into the camp itself. Filthy barracks. How can people do things like that? I never believed they could. Until now.
As American troops approached Dachau, they saw ghastly evidence of recent mass prisoner executions. Anger led some to shoot SS guards still at the camp, but Dachau not only fueled their rage, it also aroused their compassion. Paul Parks was a 22-year-old American soldier from Indianapolis who witnessed Dachau after liberation.
These people came out of these barracks-like buildings, their striped uniforms on, and just in devastated shape. One of the fellows came out who spoke English, and he said, "Are you Americans?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Thank God," and he hit the ground and started to pray.
Who were the people that these soldiers found? They were the victims of Nazi ideology and hatred. The Jews among them had managed to survive the Holocaust, whose goal was total annihilation. Other prisoners, including Roma, homosexuals, and communists, had managed to survive persecution and murder. For many, liberation came too late. Hundreds continued to die every day of starvation, exhaustion, and disease. But for others, the soldiers were larger than life. They represented the moment of salvation that many survivors had despaired they might not live to see.
Helen Greenbaum survived imprisonment in the Warsaw Ghetto, forced labor at a number of camps, including Majdanek and Ravensbrück, and a death march to Dachau, where she was finally liberated.
They opened all the gates, and we started on all four, because they let us know that the soldiers are coming. And we went out to greet the American soldiers. And we dropped to their feet and we kissed their boots. Some of them that couldn't walk, they were just crawling. They picked up and carried them into the camps.
Some of the soldiers broke down and cried at the sight of the survivors. Many made the conscious decision to put their military objectives temporarily on hold in order to care for the broken and dying prisoners that they found. In most cases, the liberators treated them with sympathy and kindness. After the Germans had mercilessly stripped them of their dignity, the liberators were the first to restore their humanity.
Anton Mason was about 18 when he was liberated by American soldiers at Buchenwald. He had survived Auschwitz, where most of his family was murdered.
I found out my father was dead, and I was truly at the end of my rope. I said, I don't know if I can go on. But there is something that's just impossible to explain. I just decided that I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try. And then, out of no place, on April 11th, the Americans arrived. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I said, how is this possible? I walked over to a GI, and young guy, and I asked him if he could give me some food. I'm very hungry. So he gave me a Nestle bar, and he gave me a little gold envelope. It said Nescafe. I didn't know what it was. So he gave me a little food. Now, you know how much that food was worth? He could have gotten anything for it in Weimar. But he gave it to me.
Solly Gnor lay half dead in the snow after a death march from Dachau. He remembers the unshaven, tired soldier who knelt down, gently touched him on the shoulder, and said, "You're free, boy. You're free now." Solly was surprised by the soldier's Japanese features. His liberator, Clarence Matsumura, was a member of a segregated regiment of Nisei soldiers, American children of Japanese immigrants. Clarence smiled at Solly, a smile that stayed with him ever since. Solly has called Clarence his angel. Ironically, African-American GIs like Paul Parks and Leon Bass, and Japanese Americans like Clarence Matsumura, served in segregated units in the U.S. Army. They fought for freedom and democracy, despite facing discrimination at home and within the Army. Nisei soldiers celebrated the survivors' freedom, even though racial tension and fear during the war had caused many of their own families to be interned in camps in the U.S.
For countless survivors of the Holocaust, that first contact with the liberators was the moment they began to feel safe after years of fear, loss, and rupture. But for many, liberation was the saddest moment of their lives. It was the moment they realized they were completely alone in the world. For many liberators, their first contact with the survivors was a powerful moment of insight. Trained to wage war, many chose to suspend their military missions for the humanitarian mission of giving care and respect to the survivors. The experiences of the survivors and the liberators moved many to become a moral voice, sharing their stories.
I've been trying to give testimony for a long time by just going around and speaking to people. And I think it's important that I speak about what I saw and that others speak about what they saw. Are we looking for credit? No. No one's looking for credit. No one wants a pat on the back. All we want to do is say, will this be prevented from happening again? That's the most basic thing.
Thank you for watching that with me. I play it for many reasons, and people are going to be surprised where I head with this. But let's just go over the obvious reasons. This happened. And I'm looking on X all the time, and people are saying it didn't happen. It happened. Our President Eisenhower says it happened. Is he in on the international Zionist conspiracy? I don't think so. There's, those soldiers. This is a well-documented thing. And I grew up with people in my family who suffered this, who told me all about it. So this happened. That's number one. Number two, my community has changed, and I didn't change with it. I'm a loving person. I do not seek world domination. I want to be kind to everybody. And there's a lot of things that I just, whoa, how did this happen? Where'd all this come from? Well, that's where it came from. When you do that to people, you turn them into something different. And that's something that's got to be sorted out within the Jewish community. And, it's on display right now, the intensity of the desire never again is, hey, not to us, but, maybe somebody else. I don't want to get into it too much, but I'm not happy about the things that I'm seeing in the world, but I know where they come from. And the first thing we have to understand as an American community is Americans liberated these people. There's documentary evidence. It doesn't excuse people becoming homicidal maniacs downstream 100 years later, but this is a reality that happened. But the real reason I'm playing this, the main reason, like at Babi Yar, they killed 30,000 Jews with small arms. Killing people with weapons, unarmed civilians, even if you hate them because they're Jews, When you take a soldier or a civilian and you say, go kill these 40 people, you could hate those people, but when you shoot 40 people and babies and women, that messes you up. You can gas a lot of people. That's a big operation, right? But the majority of the way these people died was starvation. It was diet. It was what they were fed or not fed. We're going to bookmark that idea and come back to it in a little bit because there was an industrial effort to starve a population to death. An industrial effort. Cost a lot of money. The industry of Germany actually was deployed in a military conflict, but they took resources away from that conflict to destroy this population. And they had the railroads were involved. They built huge camps. It took a lot of people. It was a money-intensive deal to basically starve these people to death. It took a lot of work. Took a lot of resources. Now, after the war, what did we do here in the United States? We imported the best and brightest of the people that ran the military machine in Germany into the United States. And that's not conspiracy theory. Go to Wikipedia. It's called Operation Paperclip. The ideology of Nazism, really, a lot of it emanated out of the United States of America. It's a Darwinist, eugenicist strategy. The British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy on display. In fact, Hitler didn't want to go to war with the British because he thought, well, you guys are just like me. Come on. You're colonialists. You're all over the world doing this stuff. Why you got to beef with me? Anyhow, we're going to bookmark this idea of starvation. Industrial starvation. But it was not a moneymaker. It was a money taker. And the people that ran the deal, they got into positions of power all over Europe and the United States. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's what Operation Paperclip was?
Yeah, but these people went up in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
These people were at the top of the heap. And then they had kids and students. You know, if I'm a Nazi and you're my son, and I'm, because you take an oath, right? We had played the guy with the oath, right? I took the oath. Am I going to raise you to be a Nazi? Probably I am. And if I do a good job of it, you'll probably raise your kids to be Nazis too, won't you? Because Nazism is an ideology. You can rebrand it. You could call it, I don't know, you could call it a lot of different things. Call it a lot of different things. A lot of this, you notice how I'm being careful about what I'm saying here?
Notice how I'm holding my tongue.
We got to hold our tongues now, okay? You got to let your mind wander out there about rebranding. But this was a very expensive effort and a very effective effort, starving people to death. Could you please play number 3?
President John F. Kennedy has a personal message for all of us on this important subject.
I welcome this opportunity to speak to the people of America about a subject which I believe to be most important, and that is the subject of physical fitness. And I speak not only as President of the United States, but also as a parent of 2 children who I hope will grow up with those qualities of vigor and energy which we identify with the best of America. This should be a matter of concern to us all. A country is as strong really as its citizens. And I think that mental and physical health, mental and physical vigor go hand in hand. I hope that we will not find a day in the United States when all of us are spectators except for a few who are out on the field. I hope all Americans will be on the field. That is, they will concern themselves with the education of their children, with the physical development of their children, with the participation in the vigorous life, and then also as their children get older, inculcate into them a desire to maintain that vigor through their normal life. Our citizens are living longer, and we want them to participate fully in that longer life. But they can only do so if they give some of their time and some of their effort to maintaining that vitality. This is a subject which should be of interest to us all. And I hope when we have seen the astonishing results which we have seen from our work in a few schools across the country, where we've been able in the short space of 2 and 3 months to change the physical habits and strength of our children, that this will spread to every school district in the United States, that all of us will participate in the life around us, and in so doing will be better citizens and happier ones. This is a challenge for us all, children, boys and girls, college students, mothers and fathers, and all of us, I think, should welcome it. I hope all of you will join in a great national effort to build a strong and better America through physical effort and through the contributions we can make by the drive and force we bring to our daily lives.
President John F. Kennedy, his nephew was Bobby Kennedy Jr. You can see that this idea of human well-being was in the Kennedy tradition and that it was integral to the platforms and policies of the Kennedy administration. What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? At the end of this podcast, we're going to play that 45-minute speech from Bobby Kennedy. And he talks about why he has turned his back on the Democrat Party. And he talks about the capture of administrative agencies by industry. By industry. By industry. Industry in Germany took resources from the war effort and paid money out. It was a cost. It was a neg value to the Nazi effort to exterminate a population. Not just the Jewish population. Many populations were starved to death. You had to guard them. You had to get them someplace. You had to house them. You had to, this is a big money play, right? We brought these people over. Their sons and grandsons are now the leaders of industry today. Bobby Kennedy's case is that those industries have captured our regulatory system. And can you put up that picture, please? And I'm just going to read you a few things. We're not even going to comment on this. According to the National Initiative for Children's Health Care Quality, it's a child policy research center, Minnesota ranks number 1 overall in all the 50 states. It's the healthiest state when it comes to childhood obesity. And I had a mentor of mine that used to say, Mr. Penn, you're only good or bad by comparison. So let's talk about the best state in the country for childhood obesity. Did you know that in Minnesota, 23% of children 10 to 17 years of age are obese? 23% compared with 31% nationally. That means 1 in 3 kids nationally are obese. We're not going to be doctors. You can look it up for yourself what obesity does to you. It's not a good condition. And it's really interesting how this goes down. If you're under the federal poverty level in Minnesota, well, let's just talk nationally. If you're under the federal poverty level, that means you're on some kind of government assistance. 45% of the children that are growing up in homes under the poverty level are obese. But if you're 4 times the poverty level, 22%. 22%? 22% of the people have a condition in childhood. In childhood, that leads to every neg outcome. Right? Remember when they were saying in COVID, all the COVID deaths is because people were too obese? Remember that? That was mainstream news, wasn't it? I'm not going to get taken down for saying that. That's just the way it was. If you're on public insurance in Minnesota, public insurance, 48% of those kids where the family's on some kind of public insurance program, they're obese. 48%. 48%. 1 in 2? What's with that program? Private insurance, 18%. 18%, 1 in 5 kids are obese? Come on now. Nationally, black children, 41% are obese. I like the pictures you're seeing on the screen, right? Our elected representatives that are supposed to take care of our well-being. Whites nationally are 27% obese. We're talking about children 10 to 17 years old. Hispanic children 10 to 17, 41% obese. Wow. I mean, I just have to tell you, if I was going to judge my elected representatives by the health of my children, I would give them an F. Let's just talk about diabetes. This is right off the Minnesota Department of Health website. You know, diabetes, there's early onset juvenile diabetes. That's a different deal. But, you know, type 2 diabetes, you got to earn that one. That's a free will deal. In 2020, 9% of Minnesota adults, about 390,000 people, have been diagnosed with diabetes. Really? 400,000 people on a lifestyle choice. Free will. About 24,000 new cases are diagnosed every year. It turns out that if you're college educated, you only have 5% diabetes rate. If you're not college educated, it's 9%. That's a class issue. By race, 26% of American Indians, even though they have diabetes, are following their diabetes protocols. So even when you get diagnosed, there's a income level and cohort level of treatment to treat a disease that ends in death. I could go on and on about this, but it costs Minnesotan taxpayers $5 billion a year to treat diabetes on these 400,000 people. $5 billion. $5 billion. What is my point? My point is, and I'm just going to make up a little story. I'm not saying it's the facts. I don't have any 8x10 glossies. But if I was a Nazi and I lost the war and I recognized what my mistakes were, like fighting on two fronts at once, like we're going to fight the Americans and Russians simultaneously, why don't we just get them to fight each other? And then we win. We had a whole movie about that, The Sum of All Fears. Remember that episode? That was all about that. Wow, crazy. And I looked at it and I said, man, what did we do wrong here? We spent all this money to starve these people to death and it broke our economy. Is there a way we could get paid to have the same result and then monetize the medical treatment that goes with the disease? Wow, that's a lot smarter, isn't it? Whoa, this is brilliant. I bet, man, this is just a story, fantasy. I'm just making it up. I don't have any evidence. But I'm just saying, kind of like if I was writing a movie script, I'd say, whoa, they had a council. Just like they had a council to wipe out the Jews. There was actually a historical event. They got together, it was a round table. I'll play clips from it that's very well documented. You have a council, you go, Where did we go wrong? Where did we go wrong? We put all this money into starving all these people to death, and we fought a two-front war. We lost the war. We didn't kill all the Jews. We failed. Let's try again. Now, we're in America. Isn't that great? This ideology, not really the individual people, the ideology. How do we monetize disease? How do we monetize disease? Because as you were saying, if you have a sick child, you're going to do whatever your doctor tells you to do because you want your child to be well, right?
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
It's also just I guess, and I don't know if you're really trying to even touch on this point, but I was raised in middle school to high school hearing about body positivity, and I saw the transition of all the mannequins becoming plus size and not using the word fat anymore. And to me, that just feels like enabling a druggie. Instead of like showing them the right way of getting
Are you
healthy.
Get us taken down?
No, not at all. Because I want everybody to, live their best life and feel really good. But these numbers don't lie. And
that's the point. You can't argue with the data. You can only say Professor Penn is an anti-Semite, which people in the Republican Party of Minnesota are running around saying, which is hilarious. You know, I just want to say that it doesn't matter if this story is right or wrong. It's the result. We're electing people in suits and ties that look great. They all went to Harvard. They're all lawyers. Many of them have military service. And the result is we're sick as dogs. We're sick. And Dan Schultz said it so beautifully. The politicians are the symptom. The disease is in us. And what's the disease? That's why I played the Prince piece at the beginning. It's the 7 deadly sins. Pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. I'll say them again. Pride and greed and wrath and envy and lust and gluttony and sloth. We have a choice to make. I have a choice to make. And I'm going to tell you, I'm still working on it every day. Every day I'm working on it. I'm working on it every day. I'm not a perfect person, and I've said it many times, and I'm not ashamed to say I'm working on giving up my addiction to sin, that it might be well with me, that it might be well with me. It's me. It's me. It's my choice to be a Republican. And I don't mean in the party. I mean to live as a Republican, to self-govern. Self-governance in the Republican way is the minimization of human corruption. And what is human corruption? Pride and greed and wrath and envy and lust and gluttony and sloth. So how does this play out politically? Pride. Do we know any prideful politicians? Of course we do, right? How about greed? Does politicians greed? How about just the people? Do we know prideful people? I used to be one. Pride go before the fall. I fell several times. It's cool. God loves me. God chastises the people that he loves. If you just get to run on an open playing field and be an asshole, hey, that's not a good thing. God rebukes and alters the lives of the people that he loves, the people that love him. Pride, greed. I've never been a greedy person, but I know a lot of greedy people. And that perverts everything. Everything. Because we become economic units instead of spiritual entities. Terrible. That's in us. It's us. It's we the people have the greed. Like the greed of, oh, can I have a program? Can I have free this? Can I have free that? Can I have free this? Can I have free that? Instead of working to be free. You see how that works? Another usurpation of a word. A free program is not freedom, it's slavery. Like equity. The equity is the value in my home. Now it's equal outcomes. Very smart people are doing this to us, okay? Very smart people that are in our academic institutions. Wrath. Oh, I got that one. Man, I can get so mad I scare myself. But I'm pretty mellow now. Pretty mellow. I think you saw me mad one time.
One time.
One time.
Yeah.
Not at you, though.
No,
just
not,
mad.
Yeah, I
just freaked out.
You just had a lot going on.
Popped. But I mean, I've had wrath in my life, but I'm not really a wrathful person. I'm really a gentle and forgiving person. But wrath, man, we got a new nuclear policy to destroy 3 countries. That's pretty wrathful. Even to go there in concept is wrathful. Envy, greed, envy, jealousy. Oh, hey, that one can hide from you. You can be jealous and not even know it. Jealousy, the whole politics of the Democrat Party is all about jealousy. That's what communism is. You have something I want. I'm jealous. Lust. What can we say? Not that many podcasts ago, I laughed at you. Lust. Okay. We have unrestricted lust in our society. We've lost the concept of love and replaced it with lust. Gluttony. That's what we're talking about with obesity. Well, it's a deadly sin. And what's the last one? It's why the precinct strategy doesn't work. Sloth, laziness. These are the 7 that Prince was singing about. Pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. And when you fall, or when I fall into any of these in any way, I'm giving up my freedom. And that's what we've done. And we then elect people that are captured because they have these problems. And we have this system where we're so unhealthy. So my point is this. My point is this. This is a new politics. This is a politics everybody can agree about. Nobody's going to get up and say, I'm pro-human death. That's a little bit far. When they get to that point, hey, politics is over, okay? No one's going to get up and say, you know what, I know there's childhood obesity, but it's body positive, it's good for you. I mean, when we really drill into this, this is dumb, okay? Because it leads to death. It leads to death, early death. The people that would do that would possibly be monetizing the chronic illnesses that come from obesity. One might say, since I'm in pretty good shape, right? I don't have any diseases. Got a badass spider bite today, which has made me sick for 2 days. But I still have some addiction to these sins, but going down all the time because I want to live. I like living. I like being here with you. I want to see you be well. I want to see you be well and your children be well. I've even talked to you. Tanner's got a little thing, a non-significant thing. I care so much about people, I've actually talked to him about it. It's not relevant to talk about. It's insignificant. But he's got a little deal. Everybody's got a little deal, okay? We can work on those things together. What we believe about these issues is propaganda. What we need to believe is if we gave up our addiction to the deadly 7, it would be well with us. But no, we didn't do that. We replaced that idea with the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. We've given up republicanism. We don't do that here anymore. That's white Christo nationalism. We don't do that. What we do is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, like the 2 smiling faces you see on the screen. If they were such great people and such great elected representatives, why are the people so ill? 2 reasons. 1, it's on us. We have to do it. We got to give up these addictions. And the most important one to give up is laziness and get out and knock those doors. That's number 1. Number 2, when we're compromised, we elect compromised people who are then exploited, and we're in this, what the Chinese call a bad circle. We're circling right down the drain. They're not going to change it. We have to change it in ourselves and then elect other people. Elect our representatives who are only there for one reason, to enhance human well-being, the politics of human well-being. So here's how we're going to end tonight. It's going to be a long podcast. I realize if you have to go, but I want to do a couple of things here. We're going to play a song by Zusha because I think it's interesting. There's this hegemonic growing criticism of Jewish people that they want world domination and that they're evil. I know that could exist in some people, but I know a lot of people that just believe in God and have faith. And if we lose sight of that, we're going to have another Holocaust. And I don't want to see that happen. So we're going to play that, and then we're going to go out with 48 minutes of RFK's full speech. Because if you haven't heard it, I want to give you an opportunity to hear it, because it's the politics of human well-being. And then if you really hang around, we're going to put up just a cool song about redemption, just because I thought it was cool. So Tanner, if you can just play the Zusha song and then go right in the RFK as you edit this today. And I want to wish everybody a great weekend. I want to thank you for joining. I'm not at my best, but I think this is a critical podcast for me, because I've had this insight that starving people to death and killing them through obesity, it's the same thing, but a little different. Starving people to death costs a lot of money. It's really capital intensive, and it really messes things up. Hard to hide that. But if you just make people fat, it's monetized at the grocery store.
And tell them it's okay. Tell them it's okay that they're that size.
Right.
I'm sorry.
And you know what? This is what you call Nazism 2.0. And for me, this was a revelation. Because when Robert Kennedy talks about the capture of our administrative agencies and how they're not working for the well-being of the people, who captured them and why? What's the goal here? We've talked about it, but let's just stay at the money level. Let's not get to the depopulation level. Just talk about the money level. You know, you depopulated numerous populations in Europe through starvation, and now we're destroying the United States of America through obesity. So think of, John Kennedy's speech about the well-being of the people. Think about his nephew, RFK, talking about the well-being of people. Let's start to develop a new politics of well-being, talking to the officers of the party, the candidates that watch this. Let's get away from wedge issues. Let's create a constituency that's too big to rig. On that note, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you soon again.
Have a good night, everybody.
God will wipe away the tears from all the faces. God will wipe away the tears from all the faces. From all the faces. Wipe away all the faces. Wipe away from all the faces. Wipe away, wipe away. God will wipe away the tears from all the faces. God will wipe away the tears from all the faces. God will wipe away the tears from all the faces. God will wipe away the tears from all the faces.
Hello, everyone. Welcome so much for being here. I'd like to introduce everyone to bring on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting. 16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state poses an insurmountable tangle of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong. We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers' markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that. And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistical feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath a canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you have opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now, in an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship. In a system of nonpartisan courts and election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups. But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, for the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me, Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the federal agencies. When a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression, and that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year, in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency, it's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and has joined this systemic attack on democracy. It also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats, with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. Oh, I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard in the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification like they do on every war, that this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, from invading the Ukraine and then to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the U.S. neocons for American global hegemony. I'm not excusing Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options. But the war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act. The credulous media rarely explain to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act. And that the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully. The Ukraine war began in 2014 when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine and installed a hand-picked pro-Western government that launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that had been negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then in April of 2022, we wanted the war. In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it's a victim of the West. Since then, of Russia and both Russia and the West. Since then, we have, since tearing up that agreement, forcing Zelensky to tear up the agreement, we've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth, as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids, and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning, have died, and the Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. The war has been a disaster for our country as well. We squandered nearly $200 billion already, and these are badly needed dollars in our communities, suffering communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security. A strong Germany with a strong industry is a much, much stronger deterrent to Russia, and a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of U.S. military base. We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran. We're closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962. And the neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles, and the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now threatens to replace the dollar as the global reserve currency. This is a first-class calamity for our country. Judging by her bellicose, belligerent speech last night in Chicago, we can assume that President Harris will be an enthusiastic advocate for this and other neocon military adventures. And President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign. Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech, our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was then in Las Vegas. Callie is arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy. Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the HHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie had been working on and off for my campaign, advising me on those subjects since the beginning. And those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Callie told me that day that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects, and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately, and fiercely, if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. But we are aligned with each other on other key issues, like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemic, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is of our children's health and chronic disease in general, I would urge you to view Dr. Carlson's recent interview with Callie Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who is the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue, and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to 50% here. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, I was a boy, juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the mitochondrial disorder that caused diabetes, also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally. Nobody's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing this. This is only happening in America. About 18%, and by the way, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There has been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. And 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall, and 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. First, and the worst, is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of whom formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. The assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting. To name just one problem, many of these chemicals increase estrogen because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors. America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900. Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth. And no, this isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen-driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cause of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy. But I'll say, it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today, government health care spending is almost all for chronic disease. And it's double the military budget. And it is the fastest growing budget item in the federal budget. And chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole, costs at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget. And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind, this dwarfs anything. We are poisoning the poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country. Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and about 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables. There's nothing that you would want to eat. We are just poisoning the poor citizens, and that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of anybody, any demographic in our country, and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms, and they're destroying our soils. We give about, I think, 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense if we want a healthy country. The good news is that we can change all this. We can change it very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies. Second, we need to change incentives in our healthcare system. And third, we need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people who have conflicts of interest. These are the people, virtually everybody who sits, Joe Biden just appointed a new panel to NIH to decide the food recommendations. And they're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans, here is healthy. And the recommendations on the food pyramid and what goes to our school lunch programs, what go to the program, the Swiss program, the food stamp programs, they are all corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. 75% of the FDA's funding doesn't come from taxpayer, it comes from pharma. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies with President Trump's backing. I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is the best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults get sick with a chronic condition, they're put on medication for their entire life. Imagine what will happen when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month, and it's being recommended for children as young as 6, all for a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. And 74% of Americans are obese. The cost, if all of them took their Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. This is a drug that is made by Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe. It's a Danish company, and the Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends change in diet to treat obesity and exercise. And in our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic to children at age 6. Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what it's going to sell, of the Ozempic it's going to sell to America. And we have the food lobbyists have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden, to allow this to happen. This $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country. For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes altogether. We're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system. And for that, we need new leadership in Washington. Because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, Big Pharma and Big Ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. Vice President Harris has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most. I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose to or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was a central leader at that time, but it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphaned issue, and I had a weakness for orphans. I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids. In that generation, almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis was one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending censorship in the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do. And that certainty gives me internal peace, even in storms. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthy again. Within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. We will be stronger, more resilient, more optimistic, and happier. I won't fail in doing this. Ultimately, the future, however it happens, is in God's hands and in the hands of the American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. His son, his biggest donors, his closest friends, and all support this objective. My joining the Trump campaign will be a difficult sacrifice for my wife and children, but worthwhile if there's even a small chance of saving these kids. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. That's why I launched my campaign to unify America. My dad and uncle made such an enduring mark on the character of our nation, not so much because of any particular policies that they promoted, but because they were able to inspire profound love for our country and to fortify our sense of ourselves as a national community held together by ideals. They were able to put their love into the intentions and hearts of ordinary Americans and to unify a national populist movement of Americans, blacks and whites, Hispanics, urban and rural Americans. They inspired affection and love and high hopes and a culture of kindness that continue to radiate among Americans from their memory. That's the spirit on which I ran my campaign and that I intend to bring into the campaign of President Trump. Instead of vitriol and polarization, I will appeal to the values that unite us, the goals that we could achieve if only we weren't at each other's throats. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around that issue now, we can finally give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve. Thank you all very much.
When I was an outcast, you said I belong. You wrote a melody with all of my wrongs. When my eyes were open to all I had done, I saw my sin, but you heard a song of redemption came forth on the cross. You said it is finished, it's written in blood. You gave us a new respond. Hallelujah, hallelujah, glorify his name forever. It is Jesus, it is Jesus, you have turned it all around. Now we've been given this victory song, that you're still reigning, your kingdom come. Our hearts are open to all you can do, 'cause you're the composer and we're singing to you. Hallelujah, hallelujah, glorify his name forever. It is Jesus, you have turned it all around. Hallelujah, hallelujah, glorify his name forever. It is Jesus, you have turned it all around. You make all things new. You make all things new. You make all things new. I saw my sin, but you heard a song.